Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero show. This episode was supposed to go up yesterday, but unfortunately there were some technical issues with the recording, so now I'm going to have to re-record it, which isn't a problem. Maybe the episode will turn out a little bit better. This episode is going to be an entry into the QB Quandary series. For those of you who haven't checked this series out before, I'll be discussing one of the NFL franchises that at the moment does not have the clear long-term answer to their quarterback position on the roster at this moment in time. Of course, having a franchise QB is, if there's one position that's important, this is the one. So today's episode will be focusing on a team that, in spite of trading up to get the number one overall pick last year, still has questions at the position. And that team is, of course, the LA Rams, who selected Jared Goff last season. Now, some people may think this is a bit of an overreaction and it is a little soon to say that there's an issue there at the position. You've got to give Goff another season. There's some truth in that. He's going to get this season to show what he can do. But I think if you look at the recent past, there's a lot of first round picks that have been taken high that have had struggles early on and been canned. I think you can judge a player pretty quickly whether they're going to be a success in this league, particularly in a situation like the Rams. I mean, if you look at players like Jake Locker, who was hampered by injuries but did struggle for the most part when he was on the field, Christian Ponder, EJ Manuel, Blaine Gabbert, RG3, these are all players that were drafted very highly by a team, and it didn't take long for the team to realise things weren't going to work and cut ties. The issue you get, I guess, with Goff is that he was the first overall pick and they did trade an abundance of picks to go get him. However, if there is a belief that he's not going to be the guy, you just have to cut ties. Having a terrible quarterback just means you're going to continue wasting seasons. And especially with the defensive nucleus they've got there in LA, I don't think that's something that they can afford to do. Now, in Goff's defence, he was put into a horrific situation last year. I don't think he was even close to being the number one pick in last year's draft. Unfortunately, the last two seasons, there haven't been any real high-end signal callers coming out of college. I didn't feel too strongly about Carson Wentz. However, I did think he was a better prospect than Jared Goff. I think even taking Wentz at 2 was a risk. Clearly looks better than Goff last year. But there's some worrying aspects to Goff. First off, he came from a spread scheme in college, one of them air raid type offenses. Doesn't necessarily translate over well to the NFL. A lot of it throwing to guys that are wide open. They're getting open through scheme. Of course, playing on a team that's going to be better than a lot of its competition. He didn't have a huge amount of experience. Doesn't have any outstanding physical traits. He's got a solid arm, but it's not an absolute howitzer. He can move, but he's not a threat to beat you with his legs. But he's got a solid skill set to work with, although he does look a bit fragile to me. Probably needs to bulk up a little bit to take the beating. That leads to the next issue. He will take a beating. He did last year. The Rams' offensive line, one of the worst groups in the league. Now they have made an effort, bringing in a couple of vets, including Andrew Whitworth, to play left tackle. That group should be better this year, but I'm still not convinced that they're going to be a particularly good unit. Whitworth, there's a degree of risk there considering his age. As great as he's been, he is at that point in his career where his level of play could decline significantly. If that's the case, they've got no answers at that tackle position. He'll continue to just get beaten down. I think that's something we've seen a lot of. Blaine Gabbert being one of the more recent examples. He played behind some horrific offensive lines in Jacksonville. It ended up ruining him. He doesn't look salvageable, even though he wasn't atrocious in San Fran. Certainly didn't look like a starting quarterback. It dates back to David Carr, I think, was the first example of this, where he was just absolutely sabotaged by what was around him on offense. After a few years, you can see the player just does not look the same. Their confidence in the pocket is gone. They see ghosts. They make bad decisions under pressure. Walk into sacks. it's not. I think once a player is affected like that mentally from the beating, I think it's something that's very, very hard to break out of. I worry that Goff could sink into that. Part of my concern with him as well, he just doesn't have that sort of inspirational factor. Some of the stuff he was coming out with last off-season was a little bit concerning. You think of a guy like Jameis Winston, even Dak Prescott, they're pretty high energy, Jameis's case to an absurd level, but you can see the confidence in them. Even guys like Marcus Mariota, who's not a particularly loud guy, but the situation doesn't look too big for them. From day one, they came in and they looked like they belonged at the NFL level. You believed they had the confidence needed to succeed, and it showed on the field. Goff has not given me any impression that that's the case with him at all. It's not like a Eli Manning or shucks kind of thing. It's just he seems to... doesn't seem to have the belief that he can be an elite player at this point in his career at this level. And even if you're not going to be, which probably realistic, I think you have to have that self-belief. I think that rubs off on your teammates. I don't know, he just doesn't seem like a particularly inspirational figure. That concerns me. We saw some of those, going back to the offensive line thing, a lot of those traits that these players who take these beatings start to get, part of it being his lack of experience, part of it being the low quality of offense around him on every level. That poor offensive line, a poor group of wide receivers, some terrible coaching over them. The struggle they've had just developing an offense previously under Jeff Fisher is frankly shocking. So we saw him taking bad sacks, making panicked throws under pressure and just heaving it without much of a care, rather than just sometimes taking a sack, not being particularly good with his pocket movement and escaping and getting rid of the ball when necessary. He looked overwhelmed. This year he's going to have to show significant improvement. If he looks like the player we saw last year, I think they'll cut the cord. I know he was the number one pick, they gave up a lot to get him, but this new front office has no reason to stick with him if it looks like he's going to sabotage him. The NFL, it's a ruthless league. Coaches need to be ruthless because the owners will be ruthless with them. So if he looks like he's going to tank, I have no doubt they'll be more than happy to get rid of him. And frankly, I believe if what we saw last year isn't a mirage and that's just who he is, they're absolutely right to do so. What they need to see progress in terms of just confidence. You need to see that, but I think not turning the ball over is the first step. That gives them something they can work on. I don't think this team's going to be massively productive offensively. I don't think it's any stretch of the imagination to suggest that's going to be the case. So if he can keep games close, keep it clean, I expect this team to lose quite a lot next year, then he gives himself a chance. In terms of the other guys on the roster, Case Keenum, we've seen what he is. He is a solid backup. There's nothing else there. So next year, what could they look to do? Well, obviously they'll be hoping that Goff shows that he is, the real deal. If not, they'll be picking very high up, so they'll have their pick of some of the guys that are coming out. You've got, of course, Sam Darnold. He seems to be the consensus top prospect. If he chooses to come out next year, I can see why he looks the most like a pro quarterback. He's good maneuverability, can throw well on the run, looks like he's got a good arm. I think he's certainly, if he can play like he did last year again, he's going to be the consensus top overall pick in next year's draft. You've got Josh Rosen, who I've heard, there's some rumours about him not particularly getting along with some of his teammates, being a bit difficult to get along with. I think that will hurt him. I don't think he'll be drafted particularly highly as a result unless he has an absolutely stellar season. But he would certainly be an option. Not sure that's the direction the franchise would want to go. You've also got Josh Allen, the kid from Wyoming. I've commented before, his tape is the one that's somewhat the most intriguing. I think he's got the biggest arm of these guys. He's certainly the biggest actual player. He's much faster and more manoeuvrable than he looks. However, absolute gunslinger mentality, makes a lot of bad decisions. He's got a strange throwing motion. You never know how that will translate. It might be like Philip Rivers, where it has no impact. Could be one like Blake Bortles, where it hinders his ability to play. Got an absolute cannon for an arm. I mean, there's no questioning that. Can make all the throws. I think he's got possibly a very high ceiling, but also possibly a very low floor. It'll be interesting to see if he can get those turnover numbers down, get his completion percentage improved by a few points. I think he'll end up being a very high pick. And then you've got the kid from Louisville, whose name currently eludes me. That happens sometimes. Heisman Trophy winner. He's again a bit of a wild card. Hard to say at this point in time where he might go. I think his style of mobile quarterbacking in those kind of option offenses, I think a lot of those guys, NFL teams, are going to be very suspicious of drafting at this point, especially with the disaster we had with RG3. However, he's put up ridiculous numbers. If he continues to do so, I've got no doubt he's going to end up going very high up in the first round. But at the end of the day, I think the Rams will have their choice of the quarterbacks. If Goff is that bad, this team is not going to win many games, in spite of how good the defense may be. Wade Phillips was a wonderful addition. This team's relying on Goff, otherwise they're going to be starting over. It really is that simple. He needs to improve just about every aspect of his game from what we saw in the rookie season. A lot of that will stem from the team being coached better and just performing better at every level on the offense. So there you have it. That's my assessment of the Rams. It's going to be tough sledding in 2017, in my opinion. They've got to hope the best that Goff can solve things, because as we all know, if you don't have a quarterback and you're relying on drafting guys, that can be a slow process to relevancy. So let me know, what do you guys think? Do you agree, disagree? Any other teams you'd like to see featured on this particular version of the show? Give me a shout, whether it's in the comment section below. Find us on Facebook, Cover Zero, doing a bit of a revamp of the channel in July. Should be a lot more active on social media, so be a lot more engagement there. But feel free to do so now. Always happy to talk football, regardless of topic. If you've enjoyed it, like, share, subscribe, check out the Patreon, all that good stuff would be greatly appreciated. Got a lot of other stuff up at the moment. Going to be doing a very interesting take on power rankings soon. I really hope you tune in, check that out. I personally am not a fan of power rankings, but I think the way I've done it is very interesting and definitely going to be worth a watch. And coming up on Friday, I'll be detailing my top 10 running backs currently in the NFL, along with my weekly review. And there's actually been some news this week, so that section won't feel quite as sad to do. So thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure as always. Have a great one, and go Bucks.